Welcome to this first unit in which we ask, what does the word community actually mean? Alright, let's get started. So, do we find a community as simply as a place? And then if so, what do we differentiate between, say, a neighborhood or a community? How do we distinguish between them? Then, do we define community maybe as the people? And if so, then how do we define who's in and who is out of the community? Or is it that maybe communities are amorphous but come together to create a shared future through plan making or other kinds of social mobilizations? This conceptualization of community is thus both a challenge and an opportunity that we have to face. So, community is such a fuzzy term that we can get lost in it. To help us establish what we mean when we say community, you have a couple of readings that have been assigned for you. So let's dig into those. In a 2017 article from The Atlantic, Garber zooms in on the identity side of a community. And she writes that, quote, community is not merely something that fits into, it is also something one chooses for oneself through a process of self discovery. It is based on shared circumstances, certainly, but offers a transcendent kind of togetherness. It is active rather than passive. And then she gives some examples. So it used to be that folks were born as part of a community and then had to find themselves as individuals to basically get their own individual identity. But what Gerber is pointing out is that now, very frequently, people are born as individuals and then have to go and find their own community. You also had a look at a reading from the Stanford Social Innovation Review, which takes a slightly different approach. Chavez and Lee remind us that it's not just about people, but about the relationships between people which can form the basis of a community. They write that members of a community have a sense of trust, belonging, and safety, and they care for each other. They have individual and collective sense, and that if, as part of a community, they can influence the environments and each other. So this feeling of community then comes from shared experiences and shared fates and outcomes. Chavez and Lee also remind us that communities are not mutually exclusive. That is, communities are often overlapping and nested. We can belong to multiple communities at the same time. Consider a neighborhood community. There may be a larger neighborhood community where residents feel a sense of shared connection because they see each other when they walk down the street or go to the grocery store. But then there may also be sub communities within that neighborhood. For example, think about a specific ethnic community or an LGBT community that calls that neighborhood home. So, because of the nested and overlapping nature of communities, the boundaries aren't usually hard and fast. They are basically permeable and flexible. So, where do we end up in this attempt in trying to define community? Well, the bottom line is it's all about people, their relationships, and it all takes place in a particular place. So, space is what kind of connects everybody together there. So, maybe we end up pretty close to how the Congress for New Urbanism defines community as a group of people living in the same place and having particularly common characteristics. Many places will have different communities inhabiting them, such as the elderly, or the arts community, or an ethnic community, but they're all joined by the close proximity to one another. Communities then are physical places that provide opportunities for relationships to be built. So now we know what a community is. But now, what does it mean to engage with that community? This is where we consider the idea of civic engagement. We'll be thinking about this idea and doing it throughout the term. I have here the definition of civic engagement from the American Democracy Project. They write that civic engagement means working to make a difference in the civic life of our communities and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation to make that difference. It means promoting the quality of life in a community through both political and non political processes. So then, when you work to make your community strong, healthy, safe, or just, you are doing civic engagement. Sometimes that could be through a political process, and sometimes it's through a non political process. Communities are all part of some government structure, and your community may be governed by a city or town council, or maybe it's governed directly by a county commission. Local governments are often the scale of government frequently overlooked, but that is the scale at which that is the government that actually shapes your lives in very tangible ways, sometimes in more tangible ways than the federal or the state government does. It's the local officials that decide where to build schools, which businesses to recruit, how much money to invest in parks and open space, how to provide safe transportation options, and where to build affordable housing. And that's just to name a few of the decisions that local governments take. Members of a community and community based organizations then will work with, support, lobby, protest, and engage with their local governments for enacting these decisions. These are all forms of civic engagement. So, civic engagement, quite simply, is working to improve the quality of public life in your community. If, as Dr. Cornel West reminds us, that justice is what love looks like in public, then civic engagement is how communities make that march towards justice. Being involved with your community through local civic engagement means working to improve justice and the quality of public life. All right, that's it for now. See you all